Hey everyone, welcome to The Explainer. Today we are diving deep into some of the most powerful and, honestly, pretty scary storms on Earth. Let's get right into it. All right, let's kick things off with the TLDR, the too long didn't read version. If you walk away with just one piece of info, let it be this. Those big, spinny storms you hear about, they're basically all the same thing. Whether we call it a hurricane, a typhoon, or a cyclone, it's really just about where on the planet it's happening.
Okay, here's a really simple way to think about this. Picture a giant spinning engine, a huge one. But this engine doesn't run on gas. Nope. Its fuel is warm, wet air that it sucks up from the ocean. So the warmer and wetter the ocean is, the more fuel the engine gets, and, well, the more powerful it becomes.
Now, to really sound like you know what you're talking about, we're going to go over 3 key vocab words today. If you can get these down, you'll totally understand how these storms work. Don't worry, we'll cover them one by one as we go. All right, first up, let's solve a mystery that confuses a lot of people. Why do these storms have so many different names? It's actually super simple, and it's all about geography. So, I've got a question for you. What do you think a hurricane, a typhoon, and a cyclone all have in common? Think about it for a second.
The answer is pretty much everything. They are all the exact same type of storm. A huge, spinning weather system that forms over tropical waters. The only thing that changes is the name we give it depending on where it shows up. If it's in the Atlantic or Eastern Pacific, we call it a hurricane. Over in the Western Pacific, it's a typhoon. And in the Indian Ocean, it's a cyclone. So yeah, same storm, just a different address.
So how do you cook up one of these monster storms? What's the recipe? Well, it's not magic, it's science, and it requires a few very specific ingredients to come together just right. Okay, ingredient number 1, you need some kind of weather disturbance to get things started, like a regular old thunderstorm. Ingredient 2, you need really, really warm ocean water. We're talking at least 26 degrees Celsius or 80 degrees Fahrenheit. And finally, ingredient 3, the air needs to be loaded with moisture. You need all 3 for the recipe to work. So, here's how those ingredients fire up that engine we mentioned. First, that warm, wet air starts rising up from the ocean. As it gets higher, it cools down and forms clouds. Now, here's the cool part. When those clouds form, they release a burst of heat. This heat warms up the air around it, which makes that air rise even faster. This whole process creates a low-pressure spot down at the bottom, and new air rushes in to fill the space. As it rushes in, the Earth's spin gives it a little nudge, and the whole thing starts to rotate, and just like that, you've got a spinning storm. And that whole cycle, that up and down movement of air, that brings us to our first vocab word, convection. It's just a fancy word for warm stuff rising and cool stuff sinking. You've seen this before. It's what happens when you boil a pot of water on the stove. And that exact same idea is what powers a storm that can be bigger than an entire country. Pretty wild, right? But here's the thing, not every little storm gets to become a giant monster. They have to power up through a few different stages. Think of it like leveling up in a video game. Let's break down how that works. Okay, so level 1 is called a tropical depression. That's our second vocab word. Its winds are pretty weak, under 61 kilometers per hour. But if it keeps getting stronger, it levels up to a tropical storm. And this is when it gets a name, like Maria or Andrew. And then, for the final boss level, once its winds hit 119 kilometers per hour, bam, it has officially earned the title of hurricane. But the levels don't stop there. Once a storm becomes a hurricane, we rank its power on a scale from 1 to 5. It's called the Saffir-Simpson scale, and it's all about wind speed. Let's quickly go through the categories. So, a category 1. You might think, oh, it's just a 1. How bad can it be? But don't be fooled. Even the weakest hurricane is incredibly dangerous. We're talking winds starting at 119 kilometers per hour. That's easily strong enough to rip shingles off roofs and cause major power outages. Now, things get really serious when a storm hits Category 3. That's when we start calling it a major hurricane. The winds are now at least 178 kilometers per hour, and the damage can be devastating. We're talking about communities losing power and clean water for weeks or even months. And then you have Category 5. This is the absolute worst-case scenario. The winds are screaming at over 252 kilometers per hour. A storm like this doesn't just damage homes, it can completely wipe them off the map, leaving whole neighborhoods just gone. So we've talked a lot about wind. And yeah, it's incredibly destructive. But believe it or not, the wind is only part of what makes these storms so terrifying. You can think of a major hurricane as having 3 main weapons in its arsenal. Weapon number 1 is the high winds we just talked about. Weapon 2 is the insane amount of rain, which causes terrible flooding, sometimes hundreds of miles inland. And then, there's weapon number 3, which is often the deadliest of them all. The storm surge. And that's our third and final vocab word. Now, this is not just a big wave. It's a huge dome of ocean water that the hurricane's winds literally push onto the land. It can be over 4 meters. That's 13 feet high. It can flood entire towns in a matter of minutes.
Okay, so we've covered the science and we definitely understand the danger. So let's switch gears and talk about the most important thing, how you and your family can stay safe. The number 1 rule is to have a plan before a storm is even on the radar. Sit down and talk with your family about what you'll do. You need to know your evacuation routes like the back of your hand. And you've got to secure your home by bringing everything inside from the yard: bikes, chairs, toys, anything that the wind could pick up and throw.
A huge part of that plan is your emergency kit. You need one packed and ready to go at all times. We're talking about the essentials: batteries, a good flashlight, a first aid kit, and of course, enough food and water to last everyone in your family for at least a few days, just in case the power goes out.
So, there you have it. That's the science behind how the world's biggest storms are born, how they power up into monsters, and why they're so dangerous. Which really leaves us with just one last, very important question to think about. Now that you know how it all works, are you really prepared for one?